Okay, so it's we'll call the special council meeting Tuesday, August the 10th, 2021. We have an agenda in front of us, and the special meeting council having sort of requested myself, special meeting council per section 194.3 and no matter of the been stated, even though he's calling the special meeting may be transacted at the meeting. President of the council to that question. Having said that, we have our agenda in front of us with no additions, so can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? That's here. Actions and decisions is the 2020 audit of financial statements, and we have Sam chartered professional accountants for details. Take it away.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for having me. So these financial statements, they finalized so these numbers here are virtually, so good news is, so each of you have there. First tab is statement. So if you just go to page in, starts off with we're happy with here that in our opinion so clean on your opinion. Of course, the rest of the report discusses based to our opinion, it discusses responsibilities management and these financial statements. So we're conducting the audit. The numbers are provided by that. And we assist with the financial statements with management. Of course, it also discusses our responsibility in conducting the audit. Of course, we have to do so standards and errors. Okay. So if we go forward on page number 4, this is your statement. So I won't go in great detail, but I think I'll do some high points here. So we start with financial assets. You'll know this year the account's total financial assets is $7.7 million. Some of the big changes there is cash. That was planned. That was part of spending on capital projects this year. Of course, keep in mind 2019 there were 4 funds get spent. Okay, so spend. The receivable are listed there, and any other big item is receivable from the government to main. This, this is some kind of gas and over 12 years. On the liabilities, accounts of total liabilities, first part of 49. 5. Looking at the changes there, it's quite cool. Where it's been is 1. 2 makes sense. Of course, that's specific. I'll go back only to or so that's why that is higher. Then some other standard stuff, some liabilities, deferred revenue, $1.4 million. So this is money that you receive or consider receivable from our government, sources. largely within your expectations. And I think we're planning that's going to be sort of the cash money to be used in 2020. Yeah. And of course, long-term debt, and the only movement in the long-term debt. So, from 9 down to 5. So the net there is financial liabilities. Okay, that makes sense given the volume. The statement just went this statement financial positions round out by non-financial assets, appreciated value, expenses, aggregate all that. You go through the statement, you'll see that 45 million again. On page 5, operation. So summarize your total operating revenues on the top there, less your operating expenditures, coming to the net debt surplus this year and adding in capital. So we just start off with operating revenue, $7.6 million compared to $7.6 million previous year. Pretty coincidental. If you look at the budget $7.2 million of operating revenue. And of course, like your revenues out there, extra grant money, and of course, with extra funds. So that's what. On the expenditure side, so we're going to see 2 presentations of town operating expenses. This presentation by so administration, tech services, transportation expenses. So you can see total expenses categories. In a second, we'll look at our presentation by objects, salary, wages, contract, services, etc. Looking here, your budget was just under 7.5, and your absolute operating share 6. So pretty close to total budget. Keep in mind that 7.5 includes amortization, depreciation. So non-cash expenditure. And so when we consider that this year, your total amortization was so that's included in that. So when you look at that, just at the line below expenses, you can see that the surplus this year from operations is 55%. Okay, so from an operating standpoint, we're close to even with amortization. So what this schedule does after that surplus brings in your other sources of capital. So there's that MSI money, contributed assets, this relates to the CFC building. Allocate some money, there was the surplus stuff. Some donations, some development agreements. So the total surplus increase the surplus this year is 1.5 million. So total accumulated surplus of the town will be 4 million to 45 million. Again, we're going to see that number again. Any questions for everyone? I'm going to skip past page 6 and just stop briefly at page number 7. So page number 7 is statement of cash flows. Basically, it shows where your cash came from, where it went from here, and I think we should look halfway down the page. You see that operations provide use of cash, $8.6 million. And then finance, of course, rebates on debt, capital, principal portion on debt, payments for 8. So aggregate those three categories. Okay, saw that as keep in mind that there's still those government grants. We go forward. On the next page, schedule 1. This is the schedule of capital assets. So in the phase of financial statement, saw it and appreciate $49 million. That total kind of right there. And basically how the schedule works is the top section is the total cost of your TCA less the accumulated amortization, depreciation, taxes coming in. We're looking at different categories, cost section. We see, what invested in infrastructure this year, and it's quoted in that first column, construction in progress. So you can see $7 million issues there. So what happens is until this project fully completes, it's now that number can go in construction. So it moves over to engineered structure, and looking at that's going to happen 21. Looking at the other categories, buildings, 5 floors, so there's some issues there. And then
Structures, $1 million additions there. So lift station was wrapped up and some drainage upgrades. And then machinery and equipment, some additions there, pretty standard stuff for operations, I guess we should say. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say in that schedule, unless anybody had any specific questions there.
I do actually. Yep. I do. And maybe this is for Lori. Is how often do we actually audit, like do a full audit on the different categories? Like, for example, machinery and equipment. We know exactly what's there. How do we,
so that file, I mean, I'm using this to build the new one because the file is there is gone.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm using, as I sit down and do the budget process with everybody, I will be going through every little item that they have so that we make sure that
and every department will be putting that in. Perfect. Okay.
And that it would be safe to say that's on an annual basis through the asset management program that
well,
we
yeah,
developed.
it will be. I mean, it is anyway, but this is in high level summary.
Yeah.
I need to know all the little
Yes. Yeah.
components.
Yeah.
Because I don't have it.
Yeah, and so like, yeah, on an annual basis, you're going to be
Yes.
doing your budget, but also, I mean, the tracking of all the tangible capital assets, there's a very detailed spreadsheet. That
Yes.
Every item, and I don't know if that's something we're going to be working on to bring that out of Excel and into.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it'll happen this year.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm just, what sometimes what happens is, an asset gets sold or something and maybe gets missed and it's still on.
Right.
Where I'm getting at, but and if we're staying on top of that, no, that's
So
good.
I will do it in detail.
Okay, fair enough. That was my only question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. It is a large spreadsheet.
I can imagine what it looks like.
Yeah.
Continuing forward, Schedule 2 shows your net municipal taxes. So on the statement of operations, it shows your net revenue of $3.6 million. This schedule gives you the advantage of seeing what your gross tax levy was, less the requisitions, Alberta School Foundation Fund and Rocky View Foundation. So that's just a little more detail here compared to the statement of operations. Same here with Schedule 3, schedule of government transfers. We're just seeing some more detail on what you receive from operating government transfers. You can see the different, level of government where you receive the funds from. And like we saw that your operating grant revenue is higher than the previous year because of some additional supports from the provincial government. And you can see that the provincial government funding this year is 413,000 compared to, normally in the range of 113,000 to 20,000. If we go forward one more page number 10, Schedule 4 is schedule of operating expenses by object. So on the statement of operations, you're able to see the town's operating expenses by function, by function. Here you're able to see by object. So you can, instead of seeing, your expenses by administration or protective services, etc., here you can see what was spent on salary and wages, contracted services, etc. And when you really compare the expenses to budget, this year, I think everything's pretty explainable and makes sense, especially when you factor in having the, pandemic in 2020 well. So some different spending in different areas or less spending than anticipated, etc. On page number 11, this is Schedule 5. So this is schedule of changes in accumulated surplus. So like I said, we're going to see this $45 million, the town's accumulated surplus in a few different locations. Here it is again, and here's a better explanation of it. So of that 45 million, 41.4 million is your net investment in your tangible capital assets. So your net depreciated value of your tangible capital assets, less any debt that's associated with that tangible capital assets, comes to that $41 million. Okay, so the majority of the surplus is TCA, basically. You also note that your unrestricted surplus went from $3 million to actually down to a deficit of 438,000 in 2020, and largely because of spending on capital in 2020. Of course, this is something that will be made up in 2021, whether it's through operations or net surplus there, or potentially you'll use up some of your restricted surplus to use up that deficit number, because your restricted surplus is still sitting at $4.8 million. So really, a person should look at unrestricted and restricted together. They should aggregate those two numbers. So you're still sitting, surplus of $4.4 million. Okay, so potentially some future motions to look at what is restricted surplus, what makes sense to be restricted surplus as you go forward. And you'll see that if you look at the different categories there, some of the movement between unrestricted surplus, restricted surplus over to TCA, you can see that some of the TCA was actually funded from restricted surplus in 2020, and that was planned for. That was the budget item, and so that all. Page 12, Schedule 6. I won't go into great detail here. This is a schedule of segmented disclosure. So this just takes all of the revenue and expenses, and it kind of breaks salary and wages down by the different functions. So you can see how much was spent in protective services or transportation, et cetera, okay, so just kind of spreads it apart. Same numbers, more detail, basically. Now, so that's the bulk of the financial statements. Before I continue, does anybody have any questions on anything we discussed so far? Okay, thanks. Okay. So starting on page number 13 are the notes of the financial statements. Now, they start off talking about the different accounting policies that the town of Crossfield has in place. Nothing's really changed there. If you go forward to page 16, note number 2 is the start of the rest of the notes, if you will. Starting with the cash note, just illustrating what the town has on deposit as of December 31st, what it earns on those deposits, as well as the fact that some of that cash is restricted. So there's money that you've received that hasn't been spent, $300,000 is listed there. So, and also some deposits that have been received. So just as a note. Note number 3 shows your taxes receivable. So on the statement of financial position, total taxes receivable is $456,000 from your ratepayers. This just shows what's current as of December 31st. So taxes that have been levied in the last 12 months versus what's arrears. So stuff that's older, of course. Note number 4 refers to a loan receivable by the town. These funds were received subsequent to December 31st. Just a temporary loan on a sale of property. Deposit liabilities. So on the face of the statement, we saw that there's $170,000 of deposit liabilities. This just gives a little breakdown of what's included in there. Some utility deposits, damage deposits, development deposits, and so on. Page number 18, note number 6, deferred revenue. So this just gives you a little bit of breakdown of what is considered deferred revenue for the town of Crossfield. And of course, the biggest amount that's deferred or carried forward is funds from the federal gas tax fund. And then some joint projects and some of that COVID money that's unspent as of December 31st, but would have been spent by now. Continuing forward, note number 7 is the long-term debt note. So really the only thing that's happened here is just regular repayments. The advantage is we can see what is repayable over the next 5 years. So annually you can see what the town's commitment is on its current long-term debt as it stands now, presuming there's no other borrowings or accelerated repayment or anything like that. Now going along with the long-term debt discussion, note number 8 on the following page discusses the town's debt limit. And so the town's debt limit is calculated based on its operating revenues. This is prescribed by the Municipal Government Act. And so based on the town's operating revenues and what is currently outstanding, the town could theoretically borrow another $3 million. Okay. It could also theoretically, based on this calculation, service, another $1 million debt payment annually. Not that I think that's something we're doing, but just so you know that you're well within the debt limit, given the amount of debt limit. So, if you did need to do a borrowing, if something came up, there's definitely room. Note number 9, equity and tangible capital assets. So when we're on that schedule of accumulated surplus, I was talking about what your equity and tangible capital assets is $41 million. So basically your net depreciated value at TCA less your long-term debt. And one more reference to accumulated surplus here in the notes on note number 10. So here's that $45 million yet again. And of course, most of it's equity and tangible capital assets. The only advantage with this note is that you're able to see what your restricted surplus is. So you're at that $4 million of restricted surplus. Here is how it's been restricted by this council, or previous councils, and it's carried forward, and this is what the numbers are now. So, if this can be a future budget item to use some of this on different projects, or maybe amalgamate some of these if they're maybe not applicable anymore. Now going forward, really the rest of the notes in the financial statements, I don't think I'm going to discuss them in detail. They're kind of required disclosures in your financial statements, standard pension disclosure, salary disclosures, and just on the last few pages, We have some commitment notes, just discussing different commitments that the town has with different organizations. And some contingencies, of course, there's this COVID contingency. Nobody really knows, you know, when these financial statements were finalized, what's going to be happening, how that could impact the town, et cetera. Kind of a standard note that you're seeing in most financial statements these days. So that is, I think the big points that I wanted to talk about in the financial statements. Does anybody have any other questions or anything else they want to discuss on the financial statements before I go forward? Or anything that's not clear?
I'm good.
No, I think we've gone over it so many
I thought we
times.
were-
Yeah,
discussed it.
yeah, we discussed it pretty well.
Very good.
What about Counselor?
No, I'm great.
Okay,
I'm good, thank you.
you bet. Jump in if we ignore you, please.
So the rest of the package that's in front of you, so the financial statements can become a public document once, of course, you approve them. The rest of the documents aren't necessarily public documents that are in there. So on the second tab is a financial information return. So this is a regurgitation of the same financial information in a format for municipal affairs. Okay, so this gets submitted to them, you know, and they do what they want with it. And the last tab is our audit findings letter. Okay, so this is an annual communication that we have to provide the audit committee or council as a whole to discuss any matters that we want to bring forward. Now, of course, there's no you know, nothing that we can discuss right now, but of course, anything that's discussed in here, we've already talked about it, and things I think are already being addressed as we go forward.
The return is just in a slightly different format of what, it's just a different format.
Yeah,
that's all.
exactly.
It's the same information.
It's the same information. Yeah, there's no difference.
Yeah.
And so basically, you know, tomorrow, presuming you guys approve the financial statements as they sit, tomorrow, I will submit the financial statement and the financial information return to municipal affairs. And then, you know, you've met your deadline with them, and they'll be happy. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for all your work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. Thank you.
All right. If there are no questions, then I will call for a motion that the town accept the audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2020, prepared by Ascend LLP Chartered Professional Accountants, to be accepted as presented.
I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and that is carried. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That's our agenda, so I guess I'll have a motion to adjourn.
You don't need to vote.